Hello there my friends, welcome to my another video. On today's menu we have yet another 1:48 scale from Tamiya, because I truly can't get enough of these kits. They go together just so well. They're a joy to build. This is a PzKpfw.38 in this scale, however I'm gonna build it as an LTVZ 38, which is a Czech/Slovak designation of the tank, because I also bought some Slovak decals for it, and I'm gonna build it as a vehicle from Slovak National Uprising. So let's get right into building. Surprisingly enough, compared to other Tamiya kits, this one doesn't have a bathtub hull. You actually have to assemble it. Of course, this isn't a complaint, I don't mind, it's just something I noticed. After a proper cleanup with a sharp knife, the parts can get glued together with a extra thin Tamiya cement. I really like using this cement for my models because it dries really quickly and creates a good bond almost immediately, so you can work a little faster. The model includes some weights, but these are also obviously optional. However, I use them because they give the model a nice heft. For the tracks, as usual, I create a whole sub-assembly of the entire running gear. This is a little easier here because the sprocket has a polycap, which is a rubber sort of circle that you glue inside of the wheel. Obviously I forgot to record it, which will allow it to not get glued to the hull and be easily removable. Here you can see me adding all of the tiny link piece around the sprockets. Tamiya mercifully made the pieces again from two links instead of one, so it gets around the wheel very easily. Then I dry fit the wheels and I start gluing all of the longer links around the entire running gear. First I glue the first wheel with the sprocket, and then I just start laying them around until I have the entire running gear assembled. This way you have one big sub-assembly that's easier to paint and maneuver around without having to take care of each wheel individually. The assembly is very straightforward and simple. This is a Tamiya kit, so not much room for error. Of course, this doesn't mean all Tamiya kits are perfect, but their 48 scale does seem to be pretty consistently rather good. Apart from the NES horn, or so I've heard, so I kinda wanna try that sometime. And here you can see the entire assembly of the tracks and wheels coming off very easily, for painting purposes of course. Compared to the Pershing from last video, I don't do many modifications on this model, I am just doing it out of the box. However, I replaced, or well, sort of, changed the front hull machine gun into just a flat plate, because that's how the tank I'm referring to had it for some reason. I guess that was the variant without the machine gun. So I simply snipped the machine gun off, the remaining plastic that was in the pin was kind of used as a filler, and then I just flattened everything else with a scalpel. The main gun also includes a little polycap to keep it movable, which I find pretty sweet. I really love when kids do these kind of things. Little snippets of workability that allow you to perhaps even give the model a bit more life in a diorama or something like that. For example, if you were making a model in a hold down position, I'm sure you would prefer if the gun could depress over the hill. So yeah, this is something small that I really appreciate. There was nothing particularly special about this assembly, that's why I'm not showing most of it, because the previous video was almost all just building. Here, it's just a really simple kit. If I had to rate it, probably like 8 out of 10, just because you can't really do anything else with it other than what the box tells you to do, which is one of my gripes with Tamiya. I think they could give you a little more choice than just two decals and build the model this way and no other. But you know, that's sort of just a personal preference more than anything. So yeah, the assembly was really simple. The model came together really nicely. I can tell you that if you ever decide to get it, it's a really good build, a nice weekend project, as they say in the community. So once it was built, I decided to make a small little sort of display base for it. I wouldn't call it a diorama, it really isn't, it's just a base to sort of elevate it. The kit includes a figure, but it's useless, that's a German soldier. So I wanted some Slovak soldiers, of course, and I found these figures that sort of kind of match how the Slovak uniform looks. They're also German, but don't tell anyone. And I also got these Czechoslovak soldiers that also wear a very similar uniform to represent Slovak one. The painting process, as always, starts by priming the model. I prime the model with a black primer, more or less because that's the only primer I have. I make sure I cover the entire model with it, covering every single shadowed or hard to reach area. So later, once I start painting it with the proper color, if I miss something, it'll create a fake shadow in that space instead of keeping, or well, leaving a bare plastic. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to make a Slovak National Uprising vehicle, apart from a personal bias, is that it has quite an unusual camouflage for a 38T. It's completely painted in buff, and now I don't know why this is. It's probably because it's a late production that already got primed in a, well, sort of buff, or Duncan Kelp, or whatever you want to call it. I painted it in Duncan Kelp, but simply, I usually see grey or white 38Ts, or green ones, or in the free tone Czech camo, which is also cool. I really like them, but I wanted to do something different, and that's why I decided to paint it in the Duncan Gelb German color. Now you might be asking why I'm priming it in brown, and that is... it's easier to paint over it than painting over black. That's essentially the only reason. I decided to paint over it in a lighter yet still good coverage color, just so it's easier to paint the Duncan Gelb later. Also, it'll create a nice base for post shading. This was NATO brown, but actually, as you can see, it created quite a nice rusty base tone, so maybe this will be a knowledge I use someday on something. However, now I started painting the model with the Duncan Gelb that I already mentioned. This was just simply easier than painting this light yellowish color over black, because yellows notoriously have bad coverage, and, you know, it's even more true over black color. With the base color now applied, I could start working on the post shading / color modulation, or whatever else you wanna call it. This technique essentially consists of using continuously lighter and lighter colors to highlight specific areas on the model, which will create a nice three-dimensional effect, and it'll give the model a little more pizzazz, if you will. It helps the model keep a little brighter, which is important, especially on smaller scale models. This is quite a big model for my collection, and I still wanna do this effect because it's a small tank, but as with the light reflections, physics, pander, essentially the light that gets reflected off of a small surface will be darker, and then therefore a smaller model will also be darker, and because of that it'll appear less detailed and it'll be harder to look at. And you combat this by creating these highlights that will make the model look more lighter. The way I do this is I spray the insides, or well, towards the middle of panels when they are horizontal, and if it's a vertical panel, I spray towards the top. So it's sort of a combination of color modulation and pulse shading, if you will. I try to push this contrast really far. On this model it almost went into white, but it still wasn't enough on some of my models. It was enough on this one, but in the future you will see me trying to push this contrast even further. Once that was done, I started creating what is called a zenithal highlight on the figures, and this will give them fake shadows and fake highlights, which will help me paint them a little more realistically, because lately I've been learning how to paint figures a little better, and yeah, here you will see me how I did it here. Once everything was dry and I took a good look at the model, I decided to do something sort of insane. It's not really anything special, actually. It was just insane for me because I can't sit in one place for too long, but here you can see I started painting each individual rivet with a highlight color, a lighter one, just so all the rivets are nicely visible even after a wash. In retrospect, maybe I would have been better off if I first applied the wash and then I started doing this, but in a way this created really pretty highlights all around the model. Of course, this wasn't specific only to the rivets, I did it on many other surfaces, and this made the model look very wargamey, and that's something I try to do because I really like how wargamers paint their tanks, and I like how they look bright and detailed, and I wanna take that and put it into my scale models. After all of the highlights applied, yeah, you can say it looks really unrealistic, of course, but you know, it is what it is. I started painting all of the tiny details on the vehicle. All the wooden tools got a dark brown base coat that will allow me to create a nice wooden color and later on texture. And rusty areas got a base coat of also brown, but a different shade. I believe this was red brown from AK 3rd-gen acrylics. All the colors I use are AK 3rd-gen acrylics. This will allow me to create a nice rusty texture and color later down the line. The metal bits on the tools got a coat of grey, and on tires I used tire black just so they are nicely visible. I always keep on experimenting with tracks, as I am still not particularly completely sure about how to paint them. This here I tried painting them in grey, which looked pretty good, but also it was weirdly contrasted to the tracks on the whole that were completely rusty. It looked kind of weird, to be honest, so yeah, maybe I should have done some rusty tracks here as well, but they get covered in mud anyway, so... Once the base brown was dry, didn't take really long because it's an acrylic color, I started creating small lines of buff on the tools to create a wooden texture on them, and this is my favorite technique to create wooden tools. I think it looks pretty awesome. I varnished the model and left it to dry, and it was time to start attempting figures yet again. Here you can see that I already base coated the skin parts with a darker skin tone, which was mixed from buff and brown. I used the zenithal highlights to create highlights on these parts already, and then I started mixing lighter and lighter colors and highlighting highlights with them. This is a little different from what I did before and what I do after these figures. I think it worked pretty well, but my figures always seem to end up looking like they have their face painted. Which they do, but I mean in a sort of metal, death metal, music band kind of way, where they have their faces painted in white color. People say that my figures looked natural when I painted these, which I was really happy about, but you know, it's something I have to keep in mind painting forwards. But I was still really proud of them. I think it did a pretty good job compared to my previous figures. And also later off camera I took some pink and I went over the face to give it some more life and pinkishness, which brought it a little further in quality, in my opinion. Thanks to the zenithal highlights for the uniform, I could simply cover the entire area of uniform with thin layers of green, which let all of the fake highlights from the base paint shine through, and then I just enhanced them with some more of highlight colors manually painted on. And then I just painted all of the details, went with a brown wash over the face, and then, as I mentioned off camera, I added some pink for more liveness. With decals applied to the tank, off camera of course, because I'm not a good YouTuber, and varnish set, it was time to start the weathering process. The weathering process starts, as always, with a simple pin wash. This is an enamel pin wash from AK. It's apparently brown wash for German dark yellow, according to the bottle, but of course it's not like I would get smited if I used a different pin wash, you know. Any wash can work for anything. However, I decided to use it here just because why not. I apply it diluted around all of the details. I probably diluted it way too heavily, so it's not particularly visible, doesn't create a much of a contrast, but there wasn't much cleanup as in an exchange, basically. So I'm not too worried about it. I think it looks pretty good. While the pin wash was drying, I started creating the groundwork for the diorama. Nothing too complex, I just created some roots with a knife, and then I covered everything in VMS mud. So yeah, really nothing special here. Back to the tank, using a very fine paintbrush and a brown color, I started creating very fine chips all around the vehicle. So fine, in fact, I was told my models almost look incomplete, because in real life on a model show when I took this model, they weren't even really visible, which is why I think I need to create more contrast on my models. This is a really relaxing process, but it also takes ages. For blending the chips into the model and making them a little more visible, I used a rust streaks from AK, and I applied around on the chips and also on some other supposed to be rusty areas, like these cables, and then I just blend it with an enamel wash yet again. With the rusty chips getting blended, it was finally starting to look like something. I was really happy with it by this point. Last weathering effect before ground dust and mud was creating more rust on the rusty areas of the rust, and this was rusted with a rusty color of a rusty variety, stippled in a rusty manner on all the rusty areas. AKA, I took a light rust color and I started stippling all of the parts that needed this. It's easiest to see here on the exhaust where I layered it on until I was happy with the result. I did this on the spare tracks as well, and the tools and everywhere else. And I also used silver to highlight the clads on the tracks and the teeth on the sprocket wheel. I used Africa Dust enamel for creating the base coat of dust. On this vehicle, on my reference, there wasn't any visible mud or anything on the tank, so I tried to recreate this. Later on, I decided it was kind of boring, so I did stipple it with, well, you'll see. But here I am just creating some dusty streaks on the bottom of the hull, and I also used this enamel product to create dust on the upper parts of the mudguards and also all around the running gear. To enhance this effect, I took several different acrylics and I started speckling them all around the affected dirty areas to create just splashes of dirt and mud and dust and everything else onto the vehicle. With all the weathering done on the tank, the video would have ended, but of course I want to show you how I made the base. I'm sure you care. It was very simple. I sprinkled some textures on the mud. First of all, that was the first step. These textures will help bring some nice realism to the base and the mud on it, I think. So they are a nice addition. And I fixed them all down with diluted PVA that I just flowed everywhere that I could. Using the same colors I speckled onto the model, I heavily dilute them and I just wet blend them all around the ground to create the mud color. This was really messy and it took ages to dry, but it looked pretty good at the end. And after deciding on positions of the soldiers, I started applying some foliage. This was done with simple self-adhesive tufts. I am planning on getting something to create better grass, but for now this had to suffice. These bases do sort of make the model a little more interesting, I suppose, but they are not really dioramas per se. And honestly, I've been wondering if I should be making them, because looking at models on model shows in 70-second scales especially, people often make these just because it presents the model better, but it's not a complete diorama, and I don't think it really works with the video format that I have. It makes the video 5 times, well, it makes the video longer than it needs to be. So I'm really indecisive if I should be making these. So if just tell me in the comments what you think, if I should be making these, if you like the additional 10 minutes of me yapping about a diorama, or if I should just keep the videos about the models themselves. However, with the foliage applied, the model was done, and we can go to the spinny bit, as I call it. So, another project is now finished. I must say I'm pretty happy with it. It's probably my best attempt at painting a model in something different than green for once, so I'm definitely happy about that. But of course, I would love to hear down in the comments what you think about it. I'm gonna take a break from the 38 scale for a little bit. I'm gonna go back to 72nd, maybe some cool dioramas. I have some cool plans. So if you wanna know about it, please subscribe, give this video a like so I know people enjoy it, because my videos seem to flop a lot for some reason. I guess YouTube hates me. And if you wanna see daily updates on these videos, head down and join my Patreon, where I will be uploading daily uploads, or well, daily updates. Not daily, but as many as I can make. So yeah, thank you for watching and see you next time.